What's up everybody, back at it again with another Magnum Quest video, and in this one it's going to be the 8th Hero Spotlight video. Definitely one of my goals for 2022 is to get more of these out faster because the game is always changing, meaning heroes get nerfed or buffed. Items do as well, like rune stats. So I'll be covering the man himself who never seems to land his pull, Fair, covering gear, runes, star maps, setups, all the necessities. Let's get it. Wasting no time, let's get into his gear set options. I suppose you could use any of the strength-based gear options, but my go-to that I go with is the Fury set. This set gives you at 2 set pieces, you're going to gain 30 hit. At 3 set pieces, you're going to gain minus 15% physical damage taken. And then at 4 set pieces, you're going to gain 20% crit chance. The reason I go for this, despite it having crit chance percentage, which is not something you need on Fair, is due to the added hit, and then obviously the minus physical damage taken is good, but hit is probably the most crucial thing on Fair than really anyone else. I mean, it's good on others, but hit is the deciding factor on whether or not his Fatal Attraction pull skill works. I'm sure you've seen it many times. He just walks up, uses it, and misses. And for a hero where I'd say like 90% of his sole purpose is this skill, you don't want this happening. More hit means lesser chance the enemies have to dodge. Unfortunately, due to only having 4 gear pieces part of the set, I don't mix and match, but I would if it was an option because I really only want that 3 set bonus, but you need 2 minimum to get a bonus, so it's a little bit unfortunate there. The other sets you could use, that could be Guardian or Courage, both work well. You can utilize on him if you have limited options. Here's what the Guardian set gives you. It gives you health recovery a second, minus physical damage taken, and then crit resistance. So it's basically pure tank stats. However, crit resistance I feel is less useful in PvE and more useful rather in PvP, where you know players will be stacking a lot of crit due to runes and hero optimization. Courage set gives attack, def, and HP. Another solid set for the tank stats since you just want them to survive. So depending on your options, all 3 gear sets can work. I just prefer Fury for the added hit. Moving over to the rune options, so Fair's job is to tank, to control the battle, disrupt. He's not meant for damage. Can he do damage? Of course, all heroes can do damage, but it's not his purpose, so that rules out the red attack rune, as there's nothing in his skill kit that's worthy of boosting his attack. That leaves blue defense rune and then the green energy rune. In all the hero spotlight videos that I've done so far, I'm probably most likely never going to choose the blue defense rune until they buff it. Something needs to happen with it because it's just outclassed by the other 2. The main reasoning is it takes time to build up like the red attack rune, but outside of bosses, the chance to actually utilize the full potential is so small. The fight is either over too soon or he just dies too early. However, I do think Fair can make use of it. Would it be my first choice? Probably not. It's really up to you and what you decide, whether green or blue, maybe depending on what you have to work with. Green for energy is good to get to his ultimate faster, but most of the time I find him not really using it. I do have it ready though, and it is useful, but I only utilize this when I need to interrupt enemy spellcasting, since it is a knockdown effect. Blue will allow him to survive longer since it builds up his defense. However, defense is tricky in this game. I still honestly don't know what's better, defense or HP, and I find he typically doesn't last the whole fight. So because he doesn't last the whole fight, he's not really making full use out of it, like I said with the blue rune. Either case, the rune stats I would aim for will be the same, so I'm going to use the green energy rune as the example. So stats to be looking for on the rune. Due to the recent nerf to hit ER and attack ER, hit ER went from 25% down to 10%, that's a huge drop, while attack ER went from 25% down to 15%, still a big drop but not as bad. Substantial nerfs here, but these rune stats are still needed, they just don't work as effectively as they once did. When determining what stat you should be aiming for, it depends really like on the hero and then like on the situation. So for the hero Fair, he doesn't have any like damage ticking effects like burn, bleed, poison. He doesn't have strong AoE area damage skills to utilize, so more enemies are hit. So because of this, attack ER is less useful on him. And for the situation, where are you mostly using Fair? He's not recommended at all on bosses, so that only leaves the rest of PvE and then PvP. So because of this, there's multiple enemies in the battle compared to one like on the boss fights. So hit ER is more useful due to the fact he's going to be getting hit by multiple enemies to stack up his energy recovery faster. The stat order I would go for is hit ER, then attack ER, and then hit. Personally, for me, I never really care for minus physical damage taken, minus magical damage taken, minus damage taken in general. Regardless of the nerf with, like I said, with hit ER and attack ER, they're still, in my opinion, just too valuable to replace. As for the rare rune stats like haste or steal, or now the newly added attack speed, it's not needed on Fair, nor would I suggest deconstructing these specifically for a rune for him, save for more optimal heroes to utilize these stats. Now let's dive into his star map. Before going into the first tier of selectable options, the first active allows him to gain 8 points, meaning 8% of dodge. Just remember Hero's star map active skills, when they have stat boosts like crit percentage, dodge, etc. They're not going to get factored into the hero stat page seen here. This is why you're not going to see that 8% added dodge, but it is activated in battle. In the bronze tier, here's where this is going to be kind of like a question mark, once again like I was doing with Kato Spotlight. I've seen players running him with def or HP or a mix of both. Personally for me, until I find out like a concrete explanation of what's better, I usually go for a hybrid, meaning a mix of the both. I think it's easier to base it depending on the hero, like say a hero has a skill damage multiplier based off HP or def, then obviously you're going to be more inclined to focus on those specific stats. But for Fair, I just do a mix of both. So here I went with defense, next attack, simply because I don't need crit chance or crit damage on Fair. You're going to want to save those for your damage dealers. Here HP, simply to do a mix of the both. And then here crit resistance. One of the main reasons, like I stated in the Katos video, was I use Fair a lot in PvP. So I know crit resistance is more valuable to lower your chances of your hero actually being critted from other players. As for the bronze tier skill, I really only feel there's one option. For me, it's going to be Veteran's Instinct. When attacked, so because frontliners take the focus for the majority, and then the scenarios you mostly use them in, PvE obviously minus bosses like I said, and then PvP on top of that, his bread and butter skill Fatal Attraction, pulling in a group of enemies, the closer the attackers are, this benefits him greatly for his survivability. Plain and simple, helps him not die instantly. The other two, First Blood seems like so-so to me. It only affects one enemy, so based off the enemy setup, and then it changes from stage to stage or players to players, I don't see this being consistently helpful. For Shiny Armor, I feel this was going to get removed way too fast to be viable. 30% additional defense at the beginning, but then it's removed when he goes under 50% HP. It's only once per battle, so it's a one and done. So how Fair operates, or at least mine does, is when he groups up the enemies, his HP drops so fast, so to me this is just going to be a pass. And now moving over to the silver tier, here I would go with Def, here Dodge. Now just remember, when your hero dodges an attack, they don't get any energy. So your hit ER won't be enhancing anything. That is why I tend to run a mixture of attack ER and hit ER, still favoring that hit ER, but it's nice to have some in case he just goes on a dodging spree. I find it doesn't matter so much in PvE, but more so in PvP, and I never really felt like I had an issue in terms of energy gain when taking the dodge stat whenever it's available in the star map. So here I'd go with HP to keep the mix of def and HP. Here I would go with hit for the reason mentioned earlier. That's why I like the Fury gear set, and then def once more. As for the silver active skill, like most tanks, maybe all tanks, I'm a noob, I don't remember everything. It's Blessing of Power, which means increased survivability. And then now finally the gold tier. Here I'd go with dodge, then HP, then dodge. Here haste, because I think it's just more valuable than hit. And then for his final gold active skill options, well, just before I get into this, with the holiday update, they actually changed Shield of Inspiration to Divine Judgment. Shield of Inspiration, I believe, don't quote me on this, he was getting a shield based off his max HP, so that would be a reason to focus more HP than def, but since this was replaced with Divine Judgment, it seems like an interesting skill, but I don't build my Fair for damage, so 40% of his attack won't be as impressive compared to if I actually built him for damage, meaning taking attack stat over def and over HP. Another interesting thing it says here is it's only for enemies under control spells. Just remember that would be his taunt effect from the Fatal Attraction pull skill. I believe that would classify as a control spell. I don't have any heroes yet who use this, so yeah, it's a little bit of unfamiliar territory for me. Comment down below if you have been working with this skill, how you like it, how it works, stuff like that. Next is adaptation to ailment. Gaining a negative effect lowers the hero's damage intake by 5%. This effect can stack up at most 5 times and last 5 seconds. This one isn't that bad, since negative effects are going to be all over the place in combat, so I'm assuming he's going to be able to stack this up rather quickly, making him more tanky. I would definitely favor this over Divine Judgment. But the skill I'd choose, and waiting for my Dracula to actually finish his star map to check this one out, since he's probably the closest hero for me, I think that's going to be able to try this first, is Hunter's Delight. Each time an enemy falls in battle, 2 random skills of the heroes instantly cool down. This can be triggered at most once every 4 seconds. So how this skill works basically is when an enemy falls, it doesn't need to be defeated by fair, so any of your heroes can trigger this skill for him. 2 of his skills instantly refresh, meaning they come off cooldown. Does this include his ultimate? I have no idea because I'm a noob and I don't have it, but comment down below if you have utilized this skill and it does include the ultimate, because that would be pretty neat for added CC. Or another example would be like you could get your Fatal Attraction to pop off, meaning more grouping, more disruption, but more importantly that taunt effect, so those enemies' attack is reduced again, which is going to help you keep the fight in your favor. I think this is a solid skill and can be triggered once every 4 seconds. And the further you get into PvE content minus bosses, so like chapter adventure, dungeon, the more HP, the harder the enemy is, so I don't see this cooldown overlapping very often, since it's based off an enemy falling in battle. Alright, so now let's get into the popular setups. So because for PvE he's not recommended on bosses, let's worry about everything else. Obviously Faction Dungeon is going to be different, but he's definitely needed there. So the typical setup in early game would be something like this. Now I might change what early game is up to, due to the chapter 20 to 30 nerf to the ground. It was crazy how badly they nerfed it. Maybe instead of 16, now I'd say early game is maybe up to chapter 20. Mid game probably 20 to 30, so finishing act 1, and then late game is going to be 31 plus, but this isn't set in stone. So early I like to do Fair Ares in the front, Ares simply for the distraction, he's not really going to be doing much else. And then Gaia, Phi, Ion in the back line. Options can be like instead of Phi for Sir, drop Ares for Osishi or Harry or Kados. You can experiment with what works best. If survivability isn't an issue, you can also drop Ion for Sir just for like a full damage team. As you progress, you're going to want to drop Gaia and only need Ares. Obviously, you can build your setup how you want. This is just what I consider to be like the basic starter. The setup changes because when Ares is level 201, he becomes much better. I've said this many times before. And Fair kind of gets put on the bench, replaced by Dracula. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to utilize him, but he's just nowhere near as needed with the introduction of Lycidas, aka Dracula. An example setup if you don't have Dracula could be like Fair, Osishi, or Harry, or Kados in the front line, and then Ares, Sir, Ion in the back line. Sir can be swapped out for Phi if needed. You're going to need to figure out what's more effective given the enemy setup and what heroes you're working with. If you do have Dracula though, then you can simply have Dracula and Ares in the front. Also, the reason I suggest Ares, if you don't have Dracula or Gaia in the back when you're using Fair, is so when Fair pulls and groups up the enemy, Ares is just going to walk up and be surrounded more, allowing for more enemies to be hit with his ultimate compared to if he was beside Fair. Gaia simply for the reason her auto attacks do AoE damage, so the grouping maximizes her damage and you don't want her in the front because she's going to die too quick. This is just what I've observed, so you may feel differently. As for the late game, especially when you get into Act 2, needing to form like 2 teams and then 3 teams, 100% he's going to be needed, he's going to be off that bench. I don't want to go crazy into setups here because there's going to be a lot of variables like your hero roster, enemy setup, but basically he's a frontline option that I typically pair with Harry or Revna with whatever backline DPS you have left over after your first team fight. I'm going to be doing a more in-depth video relatively soon for Act 2 where I'm going to be covering all the setups that I think are really good. Now for PvP, I'm not the best here, that's for sure. I've said it many times. Honestly, you're going to utilize him to target specific backline heroes if they don't have a Dracula or Revna, because if they do, positioning gets a little bit trickier. Usually against Dracula Kados, you place Fair opposite the enemy who's going to be teleported, so that's going to be Kados. so he follows him. It could be wrong. Like I said, PvP is just not my thing. That's really as far as my knowledge goes for PvP, since I basically just throw together teams and hope for the best. Now moving on to his skills, Fatal Attraction, what he's most popular for. Fair gravitates nearby enemies towards him, basically meaning he pulls them in. Applies the taunt effect, giving the attackers an attack debuff. It's very useful. When active, Shield Training skill has double chance at blocking damage. So bringing up his next skill, Shield Training skill, when attacked, he has a 20% chance to block incoming damage, so this is going to be doubled when Fatal Attraction is active. Really not much else about this. Moving over to Unstoppable Blade, deals damage but also applies a defense debuff, so it's really nice here. He has an attack and he also has a defense debuff. And then finally his ultimate, Divine Shield. It applies a knockback plus stun effect to enemies in front of him. He also gains CC immunity, and then after that he gets the Tough Skin effect when the skill is complete. So just remember to keep him on manual, because if you're utilizing Ares or Gaia like I mentioned, you don't want him pulling in the enemies and then using his ultimate to knock them back, further spreading them apart, because that's going to minimize your damage output. It's nice to have it ready though if you don't have any other heroes with CC, meaning crowd control, to interrupt any enemy spell casting, so this can be like a last resort, or it could be used to buy some extra time because you're going to knock them down and they're going to be stunned momentarily. Nothing fancy really about him, basically one skill that skyrockets his importance. So where does Fair rank in terms of Ascension and importance priority for the Forest faction? So regarding Ascension priority, obviously my rankings can change from my older videos, whether it be a couple months, couple weeks, because as time goes on, whether new content comes out, hero buffs, hero nerfs, or simply I find out new info. But as of right now, I would rank him probably 4th or 5th. So 1 would be Phi, 2 would be Cyan, basically to prep you for the Forest dungeon. He also does well on bosses. 3 would be Ion, because she's basically used in all your teams for pushing. And then 4th, it's kind of like a toss-up, whether you want to go with Fabian first or Fair. Obviously, this is all going to depend on your summoning luck, of like what hero copies you get the most of. But a low star Fair does just fine, especially after the chapter nerfs. In terms of importance priority, he's probably about the same. Sometimes their importance is better or worse than their actual Ascension ranking. He can do what he needs to do with a very minimal investment, especially if running him with Ion, because he gets that revival chance. And then finally looking into his story, so for Fair, and before I get into this, I would genuinely like to do a whole Magnum Quest lore video, connecting all the heroes, talking about the Armuda continent, but it's just a lot of work, and frankly it's just way too time consuming. It's a lot of reading, which I already hate doing, it's a lot of thinking, which I already hate doing, and it's a lot of trying to decipher their translation problems. But if someone has started this, and you've connected some heroes to one another, let me know down in the comments. I would definitely enjoy doing a video like this, kind of like a voiceover format. So for Fair, he's the ruler of the elves, son of the stars, since he can like read the movements of the stars to predict future events. He was injured in battle, and says his younger brother Phi, so I believe that's the first hero in my Hero Spotlight video series that is now connected. I'm probably wrong, I forget things rather quickly, but yeah, Fair and Phi are related. He has long, light blonde hair that flows like liquid gold. Okay, and this is what I mean by translation issues, like he old days, or if we scroll down it says here GH he believed. But yeah, we're just gonna skip ahead here. Instead of retreating to Elves Island, kind of funny saying that, he stayed with the elves who didn't want to leave the Armuda continent. They were then eventually overrun by poachers. Losing that battle, he spent time thinking. He came back, ended up winning the battle, and calling that area Esme, I think you call it. The stars say the King of Elves is coming, but that king is not him, so he's waiting for the chosen elf to show up. For a skin idea, I wouldn't mind seeing like a more dark, battle-worn type of armor. This one is like too shiny, it's too like happy-go-lucky, too much royalty for my liking. I know in the story it says he dresses in the battle armor given by his father, but this armor looks like he's setting up for like a tea party. It doesn't look like he's going to war. I want to see armor that looks like he's been through many battles, where he looks injured, but that's just my opinion. As always, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for future videos, and stay tuned for the next one.